Oh, hey, oh my gosh, it's not guitar time anymore, it's story time. Oh, my apologies for getting my priorities mixed up. It is story time. It's story time with Uncle Scotty. I'm your host, Uncle Scotty. We got our own mugs. Hydration is important. Also important, washing our hands, washing our hands, washing our hands. Hey, you might have remembered last time, things are just starting to really pick up in here. James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. James was kicked out of the house by his aunts. In this beautiful scene, finds himself magnetized by the magnified peach. Magnetized by the magnified peach. Goes over to the peach. Is taken by the whole thing. I mean, it's a giant peach, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's soft. He sees a hole. What happens next? Let's find out. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Hey, this is chapter 10. We made it to 10 chapters. Great. Exciting. Chapter 10. It was quite a large hole. The sort of thing an animal about the size of a fox might have made. James knelt down in front of it and poked his head and shoulders inside. He crawled in. He kept on crawling. This isn't just a hole, he thought excitedly. It's a tunnel! The tunnel was damp and murky, and all around him was the curious, bittersweet smell of fresh peach. The floor was soggy under his knees, the walls were wet and sticky, and peach juice was dripping from the ceiling. James opened his mouth and caught some of it on his tongue. It tasted delicious. Delicious peaches. He was crawling uphill now, as though the tunnel were leading straight towards the very center of the gigantic fruit. Every few seconds, he paused and took a bite out of the wall. The peach flesh was sweet and juicy and marvelously refreshing. How cool is that to be crawling through a tunnel and just like eating out of the wall? Delicious. Delicious. You have to wash your hands afterwards. He crawled on for several more yards, and then suddenly, bang! The top of his head hit something. It bumped into something extremely hard, blocking his way. He glanced up. In front of him, there was a solid wall that seemed at first as though it were made of wood. He touched it with his fingers. Certainly felt like wood. Except it was jagged and full of deep grooves. Good heavens, he said. I know what this is. I've come to the stone in the middle of the peach. Then he noticed that there was a small door cut into the face of the peach stone. A small door. He gave a push. It swung open. He crawled through it, and before he had any time to glance up and see where he was, he heard a voice saying, "Look who's here!" And another one said, "We've been waiting for you!" Here's James. There's the stone of the fruit. You see? Looks like wood, jagged with grooves. Pushes the door open, goes through it. James stopped and stared at the speakers, his face white with horror. He started to stand up, but his knees were shaking so much that he had to sit down again on the floor. He glanced behind him, thinking he could bolt back into the tunnel the way he had come. But the doorway had disappeared. There was now only a solid brown wall behind him. Chapter 11. James' large, frightened eyes traveled slowly around the room. The creatures, some sitting on chairs, others reclining on a sofa, were all watching him intently. Creatures? Or were they insects? An insect is usually something rather small, is it not? A grasshopper, for example, is an insect. So what would you call it if you saw a grasshopper as large as a dog? As large as a large dog? You could hardly call that an insect, could you? There was an old green grasshopper as large as a large dog sitting on a stool directly across the room from James now. And next to the old green grasshopper, there was an enormous spider. Uncle Scotty doesn't like spiders. And next to the spider, there was a giant ladybug with 9 black spots on her scarlet shell. Each of these 3 was squatting upon a magnificent chair. On a sofa nearby, reclining comfortably in curled up positions, there was a centipede and an earthworm. On the floor in the far corner, there was something thick and white that looked as though it might be a silkworm, but it was sleeping soundly and nobody was paying any attention to it. Okay, just so you can see. Look at this scene. Look at these creatures. So here, we got a grasshopper in the chair, huge spider, ooh, a ladybug, centipede, earthworm. I think this is maybe a possible silkworm. Creepy. Every one of these creatures was at least as big as James himself, and in the strange greenish light that shone down from somewhere in the ceiling, they were absolutely terrifying to behold. "I'm hungry," and the spider announced suddenly, staring hard at James. "I'm famished," the old green grasshopper said. "So am I," the ladybug cried. The centipede sat up a little straighter on the sofa. "Everyone's famished," he said. "We need food." Four pairs of round, black, glassy eyes were all fixed upon James. The centipede made a wiggling movement with his body as though he were about to glide off the sofa, but he didn't. There was a long pause and a long silence. The spider, who happened to be a female spider, opened her mouth and ran a long black tongue delicately over her lips. "Aren't you hungry?" she asked suddenly, leaning forward and addressing herself to James. Poor James was backed up against the far wall, shivering with fright and much too terrified to answer. "What's the matter with you?" the old green grasshopper asked. "You look positively ill." "He looks as though he's going to faint any second," the centipede said. "Oh my goodness, that poor thing," the ladybug cried. "I do believe he thinks it's him we are wanting to eat." There was a roar of laughter from all sides. "Oh dear, oh dear." What an awful thought. "You mustn't be frightened," Ladybug said kindly. "We wouldn't dream of hurting you. You are one of us now. Don't you know that? You are one of the crew. We're all in the same boat." "We've been waiting for you all day long," the old green grasshopper said. "We thought you were never going to turn up. I'm glad you made it." "So cheer up, my boy, cheer up," Centipede said. "And meanwhile, I wish you'd come over here and give me a hand with these boots. It takes me hours to get them all off by myself." Shall we go on? You want to do one more? I'll do one more. Let's do one more chapter. Just, you know what? Because we're here. I want to find out what happens with these creatures. Chapter 12. James decided that this was most certainly not a time to be disagreeable, so he crossed the room to where the centipede was sitting and knelt down beside him. "Thank you so much," the centipede said. "You are very kind." "You have a lot of boots," James murmured. "I have a lot of legs," the centipede answered proudly, "and a lot of feet. 100, to be exact." "There he goes again," the earthworm cried, speaking for the first time. "He simply cannot stop telling lies about his legs. He doesn't have anything like 100 of them. He's only got 42. The trouble is, most people don't bother to count them. They just take his word. And anyway, there's nothing marvelous, you know, Centipede, about having a lot of legs." "Poor fellow," the centipede said, whispering in James's ear. "He's blind. He can't see how splendid I look." "In my opinion," the earthworm said, "the really marvelous thing is to have no legs at all and still be able to walk just the same." "You call that walking?" cried the centipede. "You're a slitherer. That's what you are. You just slither along." I glide, the earthworm said proudly.
You are a slimy beast,
answered the earthworm. I am not a slimy beast, the earthworm said. I am a useful and much-loved creature. Ask any gardener you like. And as for you...
I am a pest,
the centipede announced, grinning broadly and looking around the room for approval.
He is so proud of that, Ladybug said, smiling at James, though for the life of me, I cannot understand why. I am the only pest in this room, cried the centipede, still grinning away, unless you count old green grasshopper over there. But he is long past it now. He is too old to be a pest anymore.
The old green grasshopper turned his huge black eyes upon the centipede and gave him a withering look. Young fellow, he said, speaking in a deep, slow, scornful voice, I have never been a pest in my life. I am a musician.
Hear, hear, said the ladybug. James, the centipede said, your name's is James, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, James, have you ever in your life seen such a marvelous, colossal centipede as me?
I certainly haven't, James answered. How on earth did you get like that?
Very peculiar, the centipede said. Very, very peculiar indeed. Let me tell you what happened. I was messing about in the garden under the old peach tree, and suddenly a funny little green thing came wiggling past my nose. Bright green it was and extraordinarily beautiful, and it looked like some kind of tiny stone or crystal.
Oh, but I know what that was, cried James. It happened to me too, said the ladybug.
And me,
Miss Spider said.
Suddenly, there were green things everywhere. The soil was full of them.
I actually swallowed one, the earthworm declared proudly.
So did I,
the ladybug said.
I swallowed 3, the centipede cried. But who's telling this story anyway? Don't interrupt.
It's too late to tell stories now, the old green grasshopper said. It's time to go to sleep.
I refuse to sleep in my boots, the centipede cried. How many more are there to come off, James?
I think I've done about 20 so far, James told him.
Then that leaves 80 to go, the centipede said.
22, not 80, shrieked the earthworm. He's lying again. The centipede roared with laughter.
Stop pulling Earthworm's leg,
the ladybug said. This sent the centipede into hysterics.
Pulling his leg?
He cried, wiggling with glee. Wiggling with glee and pointing to the earthworm.
Which leg am I pulling? You tell me that.
James decided he rather liked the centipede. He was obviously a rascal, but what a change it was to hear somebody laughing once in a while. He'd never heard Aunt Sponge or Aunt Spiker laughing aloud in all the time he had been with them. And we'll just see, here's the centipede and James. See, James is moving these boots. A lot of boots, a lot of legs on that centipede. There's little James right there trying to help him out, trying to do his thing. We really must get some sleep, the old green grasshopper said. We've got a tough day ahead of us tomorrow. So would you be kind enough, Miss Spider, to make us the beds. And we'll find out what happens next time on Storytime with Uncle Scotty. Hey, we got our own mugs. Hydration's important. Don't forget to wash your hands. Be safe out there. Have fun. Pay attention. Do the dance. That sound is this couch. It's the sound of fun.